gonna show the bluff for the vlog?
Yo, look, I ain't saying that I'm rich, cause if I'm honest, I've never been. But when I look at all these other kids, I feel just a little bit ahead of them. You should know the business is competitive. There's a lot of people that I'm better than. Even veterans ain't got the knowledge I do. I've been reinvesting all I ever spent.
Hey, welcome back, Empire, to another episode of Vader Poker. This one is yet again another crazy one. We get bluffed by an OMC. Yeah, that happens. We also get involved in some crazy hands. With our aggressive style, of course, we're going to get into a few all-ins, and so this episode definitely does not disappoint. So a quick recap as to where we are with our goals right now. As you saw in last week's episode, speaking of which, if you did not see last episode, I will put a link at the end screen here, so when this episode's over, feel free to go back and check out previous episodes. But as you saw last week, we hit our halfway point to our goal, so we are at the $5,000 mark, just a little over it, I think at like 5,200, so not too bad. So we're halfway to where we need to be, and we're not really on pace to hit basically another 15K by June, but we are definitely on a pace to where I think we should at least hit the 10K mark, and that would be a good solid foundation for our bankroll for these 1-2 games here in Texas. At least for me to feel comfortable enough with that bankroll for the variance that's in these games. Okay, without further ado, we head back to TCH Social. Again, they have the hours promo, so we're trying to gobble up all the hours that we can get our hands on. And we're buying in for their $300 cap for their 1-2 game. And our goal for this session is to get to the $6,000 mark for our bankroll. So we're going to need some help. We're going to need some good luck. Let's see what we can do. It's time to grind. Let's get into our first hand. We have quite a few limpers on our right, and we're on the button, and we look down at pocket tens. It's a pretty nice hand on the button to have, so we're going to raise it up to 20. Usually we make it about $10, but with a couple of limpers on our right, we definitely don't want to make it that cheap for them to get in. So we're going to bump it up to 20. The big blind calls, and the last limper on our direct right makes the call as well. So now we're heading to the flop three-handed, and we smash that flop. Ace of clubs, 10 of hearts, 8 of clubs. We've got middle set, and best news of all, after the big blind checks, the limper on our right bets $45. That's about 3/4 pot. That's a significant bet. He definitely could have an ace here. A lot of people at these levels will donk lead with a weak ace or, some type of flush draw or something like that. He could have bottom pair and seeing where he's at or something, but most people typically don't do that when there's an ace on board. So I felt with another player in the pot and this guy donk leading into us who could have some type of draw, a lot of draws out there, right? Jack nines, queen nines, clubs, those kind of things. I think it makes sense to raise here. So we make essentially a min click to $100. The big blind folds and it gets back to the donk leader and he decides to make the fold. What are you betting 45 you can't call 55 for? It's very strange. Oh well, on to the next one. All right, we're back on the button. I think it's been about one orbit later, some raise and take it's or some check folds on flops, things like that. But we've grown our stack a little bit. And after a couple limpers, the low jack raises to 15, cutoff calls, and we look down at the beautiful ladies, pocket queens. Let's go. So we've got a raiser, we've got a caller. So normally with one raise, we'd make this about $40, $45, but we have to add the limper now. So I think it makes sense to raise to 60. So that's exactly what we do. We raise to $60. Folds back all the way to the low jack, who starts thinking something a little nefarious. Like he's looking at me, he's looking at the button, which I thought was interesting. And he decides to 4-bet to 160. Now this is a good 4-bet. This is the thinking player's 4-bet. Most players, if they 4-bet, they're going to make it 3x or they're just going to rip it if they have a pretty strong hand. So the fact that they make it less than 3x out of position tells me that they're probably a thinking player and they could be 4-betting light here. So after the cutoff folds, let's see what we decide to do. Let's check out the action.
Small one.
All in.
You have aces?
You have kings?
No.
I'm all right.
So we really have no choice but to grip it and rip it. We are all in, and our opponent snap calls. Like, whoops, I guess he has aces, right? Let's see what happens.
Wow, nice hand.
And as predicted, our opponent was 4-betting us light with the ace-3 suited. We smashed the board with a set of queens, followed up by a rivered full house. Let's go. All right, in this next one, we are in the small blind here. There are a couple limpers, and it gets to the button, and the button decides they're going to raise to $25. And we look down at pocket sevens. We could 3-bet, but the guy who raised was relatively tight, so I think 3-betting doesn't really make a lot of sense here. And we are on the blinds, so I think a call is probably okay. It's a passive table so far to this point, and there's only 2 limpers. So we're probably going to go to this flop 3-handed. So I make the call, and the last limper in the cutoff, he decides to make the call as well. So like I thought, we're headed to the flop 3-handed. And we smash that flop with the king of clubs, 8 of diamonds, 7 of clubs. We have bottom set, and we're ready to get this in. So we check, and much to our surprise, the limper jams for $75. This actually might hurt our action. It would be better if they checked to the button, then I could call, then they could jam, then the button could either call or fold or something. But instead, the button folds, and of course we snap call with our set. And our opponent, unfortunately, is a little embarrassed, says, oh, bad timing. And of course, we take it down with the set and don't really know what our opponent had. He just folded. And in this next one, per this episode, we are on the button again. I told you there was a theme to this one. So after a couple of players limp in late position, we look down at king 3 of diamonds. We certainly could raise here, and there's merit for doing that. However, I like overflushing people, and people just get way too crazy with just one pair in this game. So the small blind completes, and the big blind raises to 15. Pretty weak raise. We get one caller, so we decide to go ahead and make the call on the button, being that we're in position and we got a pretty good sized pot and some pretty good implied odds, so we make the call. Flop is pretty favorable for our hand. It comes king high. However, there's some 2-pair and some straights out there, as it's king of spades, 10 of hearts, 9 of diamonds, just rainbow board. Checks to us. We decide to check back. Let's see a turn, which is the 5 of diamonds. Now the big blind decides to lead for 50. Okay, you check the flop out of position. Okay, maybe you have a king, but now you're leading 50, which is about half pot. Okay, sure, maybe. So we decide to make the call. I don't think there's any need to raise here. We're either way ahead or way behind, and there's really not too many draws out there. We actually picked up the backdoor flush draw. So I think making the call only makes sense here. The river is the 8 of spades, so it really doesn't change much. 7-8 makes a pair, Jack 8 makes a pair. Our opponent checks to us, and I just don't see what's going to call here because I really thought the opponent was bluffing. So I decided to check back, but lo and behold, we missed a ton of value because our opponent had Jack 10 offsuit and 100% would have paid off the river there. So missed value. And in these games, it's really important to get maximum value and not miss these opportunities where you can go for a little bit of thin value and get paid off by worse.
Message!
So we definitely missed out on about another $100 in this hand, in my opinion. Oh well, on to the next one. All right, in this next one, guess what? We're not on the button. I know, shocker, right? So we have a couple limpers to our right, and we look down at king, queen suited, king, queen of hearts. And of course, we're going to raise. So we make our standard raise to $20 after a couple limpers. The opponent on our immediate left calls, and it folds all the way back to the original limpers. And they both decide to make the call. So we're going to this flop, Texas heads up, 4-handed, and we get a huge flop. We smash that board with king, queen, 9 with a front door flush draw with spades. Now, with so many draws out there, we definitely want to start betting here, and we're going to bet our usual 33% size. So we bet 30, and our opponent to our left makes the call, and both limpers decide to make the fold. Gotta love those loose passive callers in a cash game. The turn brings the 4 of diamonds, so now there's 2 flush draws on board, and our opponent only has about 150 behind, so I think it makes sense just to go ahead and grip it and rip it for all in. So we jam for the rest of our opponent's stack, and he snap folds. On to the next one.
All right, quick kind of mid-session update. We've been playing for a couple hours. Running good, running pure for a change. So that's kind of nice. I've had 3 sets, 2 of which got paid off pretty well. One of which, it was weird, like with an ace high, guy donk leads, usually done with an ace. He's a pretty tight player. So I decided to raise with another person in the pot. And with the 10-8 of clubs out there, it's a very dynamic board. Lots of like straight draws, flush draws, things of that nature that I could lose to with one card. And a lot of cards on the turn that could come that are scary for my opponent, and he just check folds or something. So thought it was the right thing to do with raising there. So it is what it is. He snap folds. When he makes it 45, I make it 100. So I guess I should have min clicked for less somehow, So running good, which is good. We're up to like a little over 900, like 935 or something like that. So far, so good. Only been a couple hours, still got lots of time left. Session essentially just got started, but let's see if we can keep this run good going. This is the trend we need. This is the run good we need.
That's what you slipped in. That's what was on your shoe. And that explains the abrasion on your palm.
To get us to that 10K mark twice, technically. All right, let's get back in there and grind. Let's go.
Hey kids, we've gotten to the hand that you've all been waiting for. We get bluffed. This guy right here. gets bluffed. This is not a fun one. It's going to hurt my soul a little bit to tell you this and to watch this again. So not going to lie. Feels like a dagger in the heart. So it folds to middle position, who raises to 12. Hijack decides to make the flat call, and we look down at ace queen suited in the cutoff. I know we're not on the button, right? Another crazy hand. How can we not be on the button? But we're in the cutoff, so that's cool. So we raise to $50. It's a little bit bigger than we normally make it. So I don't know why I did, but I raised to 50, whatever. And the button snap calls, and then the small blind decides to come along for the ride as well. You know, calling 3 bets out of position. Why not? The original raiser makes the call, and the flatter in the hijack decides to fold. So we're going to this flop, Texas heads up 4-handed. And that flop isn't the worst, but it's also not the best for our hand. It is the best for a 3-better, but there's a lot of people in this hand, right? There's a lot of possible sets, 2 pairs, things of that nature. I mean, it's king, queen, 9 with the front door flush draw. So we've got to tread lightly here. Checks to us. We decide to go ahead and check, and then the button checks. Okay, feel okay about our ace queen. The turn's the 4 spades. Okay, pretty safe card. Checks to us again. I really feel good about my ace queen now, so now it's time to start betting for sure, protect our equity a little bit, and get value from worse, right? So we decide to make a bet of 115. The button folds, the small blind thinks about it for a little bit and decides to make the call. And the initial raiser finally puts in the fold. So now we're heads up going to the river. So the river brings the jack of spades. Now we have a one-liner to the straight. This is not the best run out for our hand. We do block the nuts just slightly with having an ace in our hand. But after thinking for some time, our opponent leads out for $260, about half pot. That's a huge bet. There's a one-liner to the straight on the board. So it's pretty polarizing. So he's either got a straight or 2 pair or a bluff, right? But he's an OMC. And he hopped the fence on a 3-bet out of position. So what's he got, right? A lot of hands that do that, jacks, 9s, 10s, ace queen, possibly ace king. It is an OMC. All of those hands beat us, right? King queen suited, possibly a queen jack suited, although we blocked that with the queen ourselves. A lot of hands out there. Jack 10 just straight up flopped the joint and was just milking me, also possible. All of these things were going through my mind. I mean, I tanked forever. Then we finally make the fold, and we ask him to show us the bluff. Let's see what happens.
I'll show the bluff for the vlog. You gonna show the bluff? That was the bluff. Nice hand. That is the bluff.
All right, so we get involved in kind of a stupid situation, kind of because of the regular that's on our left. We look down at pocket 10s, and we're first to act, so we open to $10, and decides to 3-bet us to $40. That's a pretty big 3-bet. He is a thinking player, and I know with hands like king, queen, ace, jack, those type of hands, he is 100% going to 3-bet. The cutoff decides to make the call, the button makes the call, and it folds back to us. So we have some options here. Folding out of the question, right? So we're either going to call or we're going to 3-bet. I don't want to go out of position against 3 other opponents with pocket 10s. It's just not a great spot to be in. So I think the only move here really is to 4-bet over the top and try to isolate against one player, or just take this pot down pre-flop, which would be, not a bad thing with pocket 10s. So we decide after much deliberation to 4-bet to $160. Thinks about it for a few seconds before making the fold, kind of as predicted. The cutoff folds, as predicted, and the button does something weird. The button back jams after cold calling a 3-bet all in for only like another, $40 or something like that. I think she just bought in. This is her first hand, and she had $200. So it's not much more money after putting in $160. I'm never going to fold for $40. So of course we snap call, and our opponent has pocket queens. But she's really cool and asks us if we want to run it twice. And so of course we oblige and say, yeah, let's run it twice. So the first board comes out. She flops a set of queens. We turn a set of 10s. So actually technically we had 4 sets. Really, I think actually 5 this session. One of which obviously loses. But unfortunately, I wasted a 10. So on the second run out, we just kind of brick everything, and we just give away $200 in a real, just like I said, stupid variance situation. Obviously, we knew we had the best hand over in the cutoff. It's just the big blind played it, I guess, well. I don't know what you want to say. She only had 100 big blinds. I think she's supposed to rip it there, but it is what it is, and we just got caught in an unfortunate situation and lit $200 on fire. All right, next hand. We have a straddled pot in this next one, and the player to our right is in middle position, and they decide to limp for $5, and we're in the low jack, and we look down at ace queen offsuit. That's a pretty nice hand for the situation, so we're going to go ahead and raise it up. Typically, we'd make it about 20 in this spot, but the limper was definitely loose passive, and I thought would would call 25 for sure. So in fact, I probably could have made it 30. So we make it 25. The hijack on our left calls, the big blind calls, straddle folds, and the limper makes the call, as kind of predicted. So now we're heading to the flop, four-handed. Texas heads up. And that flop's really good for our range. It's ace, queen, 10 rainbow. So it checks to us, and when we're multi-way, we're just going to typically bet about 33% pot. So that's what we do with a bet of $35. The hijack calls on our left, and everybody else folds. The turn comes the jack of diamonds. So now we have a one-liner to the straight and a backdoor flush draw that are possible out there, although we block it a little bit with the ace of diamonds, so I think it's okay to check here. So we check and our opponent checks back. The river is the eight of spades. I will say now any king or any nine can make a straight, so that is unfortunate. But I do think a two pair would call us here, and any straight, maybe not the nine, but any king for sure is going to raise. So I think it makes sense to bet fold in this spot. So we kind of make a little bit of a blocker bet of $45. Our opponent thinks for a few seconds before making the fold. Probably had one pair or two pair, and we did miss out a little bit on that value there with the run out, but it is what it is. Let's go on to another hand. We're in middle position, and we look down at pocket fives, and we're raised first in, so we're going to make our standard open to $10. Folds to the big blind, who makes the call, and we're actually going to go heads up in Texas. Can you believe it? That flop, not the best for our hand. It comes queen 10 3 rainbow. Our opponent checks to us, so we're going to make a range bet here. So we bet half pot of $10, and the big blind calls. The turn is a four of spades, Badoogie. Checks to us, we decide to check back. The river's the 10 of spades. Our opponent checks once again, and they could certainly have a lot of 10s here, but I think they would bet. So I really feel like pocket fives warrants a super thin value bet here, but I couldn't pull the trigger. I didn't do it, and I don't know why. But looking back on it, I definitely regretted not betting the pocket fives, as obviously it's the best hand, and who knows, maybe ace high or king jack or something decides to make the call. I still think I should be going for some thin value there, but unfortunately we missed out on that. We have another straddled pot, and we have quite a few limpers on our right, and we look down at ace 7 suited. Again, another one to over limp. I don't think raising here makes a ton of sense. We're only going to get called by like everybody. So we decide to over limp. We thought it was 2, turns out it was 5. So we flick in the $5 after we flick in the 2, and the small blind raises to 15. He's the same opponent from earlier in this episode that made that small raise after a few people limped. So after a couple people call, I feel pretty good about my ace here, and I'm going to flick in the chips as well. We got a pretty massive pot here, and the implied odds are good. So we go to the flop. I don't know, super multi-way. And that flop, pretty good for us. And it comes ace 6 4 rainbow. Instead of checking this time, the small blind bets $25. One limper calls, gets to us, and we're not going to fold an ace at this point, even though that bet from the small blind is pretty strong. So is kind of the call. So, of course, nothing left to do but call. The turn brings another 4. Now, the small blind should not have this card. In fact, the two people who called, myself and the limper, we have all the 4s. But yet the small blind leads again. So they bet 50 into 150. So a third pot bet, which doesn't scream strength to me. So once again, I think calling makes the most sense. We're still in that way ahead, way behind type situation. Maybe he has ace 4 or something like that and raise, like ace 4 suited, it's possible. So I think, again, making the call only makes sense. The river brings the jack of diamonds. So now if he did have an ace like ace 10 or something like that, we got lucky and we're chopping. But our opponent checks to us. So there's no way he's got a big hand, and maybe I can get him off a chop if he does have that ace 10, ace 9, ace 8, something like that. So I put in a healthy bet of 150, and the small blind snap folds. So after quite a roller coaster of a session, hitting sets like, what do we hit sets like 4 or 5 times in this episode? I think it's time to call it a night. We have a pretty good session. We are real close to our goal, and we decide to call it a night.
All right, end of the night. Once again, roller coaster ride today. It's been fucking bananas the last few sessions. I keep getting close to these like 1K, 2K days. And then next thing you know, I'm just like $500 profit or $400 profit. Can't seem to just get over those humps when I get to that point. There's always just some crap that happens. So just weird situations that I find myself in and just some strange spots where I have to lose money, And the bluff by the OMC, I did not expect pocket eights there. I really thought he had some type of straight or something. And then later on, I saw him play a little weird in some weird spots. So had I seen those hands first, I would have definitely called with ace queen, but he hadn't really gotten out of line. He didn't do anything spazzy. So I just wasn't expecting him to turn eights into a bluff. And it went through my mind, would he turn ace jack into a bluff or something like that. And in the end, I just figured, you know, no. And I folded. And then of course I say show for the vlog and he shows pocket eights. That's fucking funny. I really thought he was going to turn over like a straight. Nope. And then the tens versus the queens hand is just so, as a weird spot. I knew I was way ahead of the three better. I was certain tens were the best hand, and I wasn't about to take tens four-way, you know, flop out of position. That was definitely a 4-bet spot there, which is essentially was a 4-bet jam. The other two folded. They didn't even think hard, you know, long about it. So I definitely had the best hand over them. And then when the queens go all in, they were like 30 bucks more, 40 bucks more. What am I gonna do? Fold? No way. So she just happened to play queens in a weird way, and I happened to have close to top of range. What are you gonna do? So if we can keep pace like this over the next several weeks, I got a good shot at hitting our goals and our WSOP bankroll challenge as well. Let's see what we can do. We'll be back tomorrow. Peace.